Hey folks, Jason the Dead Card Gamer here, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to play MegaMan NT Warrior trading card game. This is one of my very favorite games, and is one that I have played quite a few times. First, let's start off with a little overview. This game is based on the MegaMan NT Warrior anime, and basically you are controlling an avatar, which is called a NetNavi in the game, in cyberspace, fighting against each other. During this battle, your NetNavi will take damage by discarding cards from your deck into your discard pile, or milling cards, if you will. For every damage you take, you mill a card, and once your opponent's deck is empty, you win. There are 4 types of cards in the game: a NetNavi, a resource, an event, and battle chips. Let's go over the parts of the card. First up is your NetNavi. This is your main character in the game, and you only get 1 per deck. At the top of the card, you'll see your NetNavi's name. Under that will be its title. There are multiple versions of some NetNavis, so the title is important to be able to tell them apart. Next to that, you'll see the NetNavi's emblem. This is different for every NetNavi, and it helps you meet player requirements for other cards, which we'll get into a little bit later. Below that, you'll see 3 numbers. The top one is your NetNavi's strength. This is how much physical damage your NetNavi can do without any aid at all. Below that, you'll see the defense. This is how much damage your NetNavi can absorb before they start taking energy losses, or, like we said earlier, milling from your deck. Under that is the blast number. This is the number of cards your NetNavi flips over when making a blast attack. Some NetNavis have specific abilities, which you'll find at the bottom of their card. Next up is resources. Resources will have their name across the top of the card. Each resource is unique on your side of the field. You can only have 1 of any card with a given name in play at a time. And that's why some resources will have a title underneath. There may be multiple versions, for instance, of Lan, who is the character who controls the MegaMan NetNavi in the show. And you can have multiple types of Lan in your deck, but you can only have 1 Lan on the field at any time. In the upper right hand corner of pretty much every card, except for a NetNavi card, you'll find the destiny number. This destiny is used to generate random numbers throughout the game, most notably during a blast attack. Right below the art, you'll see the card type. In this case, it's a resource. It could also be an event. To the right of the card type, you'll see the emblem and color requirements. Most cards in the game require you to spot colored resources or NetNavi emblems in order to play them. We'll get into play requirements a little bit more detail later. Under that is the power gauge requirements. Again, most cards are going to have this requirement, and we'll go into it more after we go over the parts of the card. Under that is the card text. This may include the resources subtype, and also lists all the card's effects. Under the card text, you'll see the lore, which is usually a quote from the show and doesn't actually affect gameplay. On the bottom right of the card, if it's a NetNavi specific card, it will have the NetNavi's emblem. Events are mostly laid out the same as resource cards. At the very top of the card, you'll find the name. To the right of that is the destiny number. Right under the art will be the card type. To the right of the card type is the emblem and color requirements. Underneath all that is the power gauge requirements. And then in the text box on the bottom is the card text and the lore. Battle chips have their own layout. Along the left side of the card, you'll see the name. In the top right corner is the destiny number. Below the art, you'll see the emblem and color requirements. Below that, you'll see the power gauge requirements. And at the bottom, you'll find the card text. Some battle chips are actually NetNavi specific, and will also have the NetNavi's emblem. Now, let's look at field setup. The MegaMan starter decks come with this handy playmat, which is really useful for this game because it's got a kind of unique setup. Here in the middle of your top row, you'll have your NetNavi, and then next to it, you'll have 4 resource slots. You can only have 4 resources in play at any given time. Beneath that, you have your 5 power-up slots for your power gauge, and then also a spot for your deck. These power gauge spots fill up from left to right. Now we'll go over how to play a card and how to spot all the requirements that you need in order to play it. When playing cards, several of them will have different requirements that you'll need to find on the field in order to be able to play them. Some, however, like this guy here, are free to play. It doesn't have any color requirements, and you can see the power bar is all black, it's empty. So this is a resource that we can just put into play without having to spot anything. However, if we wanted to play this event here, it's actually lucky for us that we already have that blue resource in play because we can spot it in order to meet the requirement of this card. Some other cards will have power gauge requirements. Currently, we have 3 cards in our power gauge, so we can also play this one. It doesn't have any color or emblem requirements though. This card is actually a Sharkman specific resource card. So you can see here it has a small Sharkman symbol, which means that we need to find one other Sharkman card in play before we can use this. Luckily, our NetNevi has a Sharkman symbol, so it gives us our first one that we need. It also requires 3 power, which we currently have. When we put this one into play, it is not only a blue resource for us to spot, but it also gives us a second Sharkman symbol, in case we find a card that needs 2. When spotting cards to use as requirements, you don't use up the symbols or colors on them. I can spot this as a blue card for 3 different cards if I want to play it. I can spot it as a Sharkman symbol for 4 different cards. That's fine. You can use the same cards to spot multiple times for multiple requirements. But you can only use the cards on your side of the field, not your opponent's. At the start of a game, we'll lay out our NetNavi, we'll draw 4 cards for our hand, and then we're ready to go in the turn sequence. The first phase of every turn is the draw phase. You start the draw phase by powering up. You do this by placing the top card of your deck into the first power slot on your gauge. Every turn, you add another card until the power gauge is full. If the power gauge is full, you'll remove the first card, slide everything else down, and put a new card in the 5th slot. After power up, you draw a card and add it to your hand. Then, if you have more than 5 cards in your hand, you discard down to 5. After that, we move into the resource phase. During the resource phase, you can play up to 4 resources and fill up those slots that we showed you earlier. You can play any card that you have a space for in your slots and that you meet the requirements to play. Remember, resources on your side of the field are unique. So if you already have something in play, you can't play another copy of it, or even another copy that has a different title but the same name. The main phase is where the majority of the action in the game takes place. During your turn, you'll take the first action in the main phase, then your opponent will get an action, and then you get an action. And it goes back and forth until both players have passed consecutively. You can take as many of these actions as you want in any order you'd like to take them in. One of the actions you can take is playing a battle chip. You only get 1 battle chip per main phase. That's 1 on your main phase and 1 on your opponent's. To play a battle chip, you of course spot the requirements that it needs, put it in play, complete whatever its effect is, and then discard it. You could play an event, which is pretty similar to playing a battle chip, except that you can play as many events as you want in a turn, not just the one like a battle chip. Again, spot the resources that you need, put it into play, complete the card's effects, and then discard it. You can spend a resource that you already have in play. As long as it was played in some previous resource phase and is already on the field, you can use a resource's spend ability. When you do, you declare you're using it, complete its effect, and then discard it. Be mindful of the order that you take your actions in, because sometimes you'll think, man, I'd really like to spend that resource, and then you do it, but now you don't meet the color requirements for one of the other cards you might have wanted to play later in the turn. So remember that sequencing is really important in this one. The other action you can take is using your NetNavi's Blast. Now, blasting is another thing, like battle chips, that you can only do once per turn, but it's also something that you can only do during your own main phase. You can't blast on your opponent's turn. To blast, You look at your Net Navy's blast number. As long as you have more cards in your power gauge than that blast number, you can blast. To blast, you flip over that many cards from the right side of your power gauge. In this case, we've got 2. Now, you take one of the destiny numbers off of these cards, usually you're going to want the higher one, and add it to your Net Navi strength for the rest of the turn. In this case, we've got a 4, add it to his strength of 2, and now his strength is 6. Some cards will affect your Net Navi's blast, and some will affect your blast destiny. Cards that affect your Net Navi's blast, the number of cards that you actually flip over to find a destiny number, those need to be played before you blast. However, anything that affects your blast destiny needs to be played after your blast, because you don't have a blast destiny until you've used your blast action. Once again, kind of like playing resources, you need to be careful about when you blast, because you could blast and then not have your power gauge requirements to play some of your other cards. Just a thing to keep in mind. After the main phase is the battle phase. What you'll do is take your Net Navi strength, add up any modifiers that you got this turn, including your blast destiny, any battle chips or events you may have played, add all that up, and that is your Net Navi's total strength for the turn. Do the same with your opponent's Net Navi's defense. Subtract their defense from your strength, then they take that much damage. They take the damage by flipping over cards from their deck into their discard pile or losing energy. At the end of turn, any of your temporary effects all go away and your Net Navi returns to its normal stats. Then you pass priority to your opponent. There are a few other key concepts that you'll need to know. Some resource cards are allies. This is your Net Navi buddy who comes and helps you out in a fight. Again, this is where the names come in important. Sharkman cannot be an ally to Sharkman because they have the same name, and also because that'd be ridiculous. Some cards will tell you to burn a power. This can either be a cost, like this card, or they can actually be something that you do to your opponent. Burning a power is taking the rightmost card in your power gauge and discarding it. Simple as that. Other cards might tell you to lose an energy. Losing an energy is simply taking the top card off your deck and discarding it. Some cards will allow you to recharge energy. This is done by taking your discard pile, shuffling it, presenting it face down to your opponent, having them select the number of cards you're recharging, and then you get to put those cards on the bottom of your draw deck, thus basically giving you more life. Building your deck isn't too hard. You need one Net Navi and 59 other cards. Yes, 59 precisely, because since your life total is essentially the size of your deck, you have to make sure that everybody's deck is exactly the same size. Those 59 cards can be anything, as long as you don't have any more than 4 copies of a card, and as long as all of the Net Navi specific cards match the Net Navi you're playing. And that's basically how you play MegaMan. If you have any questions, or you think there's anything I left out, please let me know down in the comments. Otherwise, have a great time playing, and we'll see you next time. I'm Jason the Dead Card Gamer. Have a good one.